Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon. Uh, session, the last session of cultural studies subject comes to you from London College of International Studies, and that's me, Dr. Mohammed Al-Luishi, the instructor of the subject. We came yesterday to this point, discover why, a creator introduces a novel concept, sound, dance, or is that exotic that resonates with a small audience. Amplification, the algorithm identifies engagement and pushes content to similar users, creating potential growth. Adaptation, other creators remix, iterate, and personalize the trend, creating numerous variations. Stereation, the trend reaches a mass awareness, becoming recognizable even to non-participants. Decline, early adopters move on to newer trends, often explicitly rejecting the now mainstream concepts. Examples of TikTok micro fandoms. The platform has spawned countless highly specific communities, including which took modern practitioners of witchcraft, charging spells, rituals, and spiritual guidance. Cleantalk, cleaning enthusiasts, sharing specialized techniques for obscure cleaning challenges. BookTok, literature communities that have demonstrably impacted publishing sales and revived backlist titles. Curl curly hair care specialists sharing products, recommendations, and styling techniques. Deep Talk, Elite Talk, self-described elite side of TikTok featuring abstract showlist hammer. Multiple identity fluidity. Unlike previous subcultures that often demanded exclusive allegiance, TikTok enables participation in multiple micro communities simultaneously. A user might engage with fashion uh, aesthetics like Y2K and dark academia, while also participating in BookTok and WitchTok communities. This fluidity allows for unprecedented identity experimentation and hybridity, fundamentally changing how young people construct and express their sense of self through subculture affiliation. So this slide notes TikTok's multiple identity fluidity, where users participate in various communities simultaneously. For example, Y2K fashion experimentation and hybridity and self-expression. The slide's purpose is to contrast with exclusive past subcultures showing digital flexibility. This long explanation delves into how this fluidity redefines identity, allowing hybrid selves and critiquing potential superficiality in the course's context. So this fragmentation and exploration of subculture participation raises profound questions about authenticity, belonging, and sustainability of cultural movements in the algorithm age. When trends move at such velocity, can they provide a deep sense of identity and community that defined previous subcultures, or do they represent a more superficial form of cultural consumption. So this slide poses critical questions about TikTok's fragmentation. Does it undermine authenticity, belonging, and sustainability? Can fast-moving trends offer the deep identity of past subcultures, or are they merely superficial consumption? The slide's purpose is to encourage reflection on technology's effects on cultural depth. This long explanation explores these questions as a critic of digital acceleration, trying into the course's enduring cycle and promoting students to consider subculture's future. So the enduring cycle, rebellion, resonance, and the commodification content is about emergence and rebellion. Subcultures typically emerge from a sense of alienation or dissatisfaction with mainstream society. Young people identify shared grievances or desires and begin developing distinctive cultural expressions in response. These expressions often explicitly reject them in um, and values and aesthetics. This slide introduces the enduring cycle of subcultures from rebellion to codification. The purpose is to provide a framework for understanding patterns across eras, showing subcultures as phenomena. This long explanation sets up the cycle of lens for analyzing how subcultures emerge, resonate, and get absorbed, connecting all parts of the course. So this slide describes the cycles start subcultures emerges from alienation or dissatisfaction, developing distinctive expressions that reject the dominant values. The purpose is to explain origins as responses to social pressures. This long explanation explores how this phase involves creating new cultural forms from grievance, laying the foundation for community and resonance in the cycle. New rebellion. As the original subculture is absorbed, a new generation of youth seeks fresh forms of distinction and opposition. They often explicitly reject in the now commercialize the previous subculture, beginning the cycle anew with different cultural forms and expressions. The slide notes the cycle's renewal as the original subcultures is absorbed into mainstream. A new generation rejects the commercialized version, starting the cycle anew with fresh forms. The purpose is to show ongoing evolution and generational conflict. This long explanation examines how this culture, how this starts a cultural reinvention, ensuring subcultures remain dynamic responses to changing societies. Mainstream absorption Subcultural elements gradually lose their oppositional meaning as they become widely available commodities. What began as symbols of resistance become fashion trends, discovered, divorced from their original context. The subculture's revolutionary potential is neutralized through this process. This slide explains mainstream absorption. Subcultural elements lose their oppositional meaning and become commodified as fashion trends. Divorced from context. The purpose is to critique how resistance is neutralized. This long explanation delves into co-options mechanics, showing how capitalism transforms radical symbols into products, trying into the course's appropriation theme. Community formation. As distinctive practices, language, music, and fashion develop, they create powerful symbols of collective identity. These cultural makers allow participants to recognize each other and form communities based on shared values and tastes, creating a sense of belonging for those who feel marginalized. This slide highlights community formation. Subcultural practices, language, music, and fashion become symbols of identity, creating belonging for marginalized groups. The purpose is to emphasize subculture's social role and solidarity. This long explanation explores how these symbols foster inclusion and resistance, connecting to the course's identity formation theme. Media attention. Distinctive subculture styles attract media cover age, often initially framed as deviant or threatening. This cover age simultaneously amplifies the subculture's visibility while distorting its meaning through sensationalism. Moral panics frequently ensue, reinforcing the subculture's oppositional status. So this slide discusses media attention, subcultural styles, draw coverage, often framed as deviant, amplifying visibility while distorting meaning and creating moral panic. Purpose is to show media's role in subcultural spread. This long explanation examines how sensationalism cements status but fuels backlash, trying into the course's analysis of representation. Commercial interest. As visibility increases, commercial entitles identify profit potential in subcultural styles. They begin producing watered-down versions of subcultural fashion, music, and imagery for mass consumption. Early commercial adopters often retain some authentic connection to the original movement. So this slide covers commercial interest. Businesses produce diluted versions for mass consumption, while early adopters try to retain Authenticity. The purpose is to illustrate co-options stage. This long explanation explores the tension between original intent and profit, showing how subcultures fuel innovation but lose edge. Acceleration of the cycle. While this basic pattern has remained consistent across decades, the time required for this cycle to complete has dramatically compressed. 1950s to 1970s, subcultures typically evolved over 5 to 10 years before significant commercial coction. This slide outlines the cycle's acceleration from 5 to 10 years and 1950s to 1970s to weeks or days in the 2020s due in digital platforms. The purpose is to highlight technology's impact on subcultural lifespan. This long explanation critiques how speed affects authenticity, connecting to digital fusions in part 3. The cycle accelerated from 1980s to 1990s to approximately 2 to 3 years as media coverage and global communication increased. 2000 to 2010, social media reduced the cycle to months as visibility and commercial response accelerated. 2020, algorithm-driven platforms like TikTok have compressed the cycle to weeks or 7 days or even days. Cultural appropriation versus cultural exchange, critical length. Power dynamics in cultural borrowing. When examining how elements move between subcultures and mainstream culture or between different cultural groups, power dynamics become crucial consideration. Cultural appropriation occurs when a dominant group adopts elements from marginalized culture without understanding, acknowledgement, or respect. Often while the originators continue to face discrimination for those same cultural expressions. So this line defines cultural appropriation versus exchange, focusing on power dynamics where dominant groups adopt from marginalized without respect, while originators face discrimination. The purpose is to provide a critical lens for cultural borrowing. This long explanation explores ethical implications, encouraging analysis of subcultural exchange. So, for example, when white teenagers in affluent suburbs adopt stylistic elements from hip hop cultural while remaining disconnected from socioeconomic conditions that produced those expressions and potentially harboring prejudice against the communities that created them, appropriation occurs. The adoption becomes attraction rather than appreciation. So the slide gives an example of appropriation, white teens adopting hip-hop elements while holding prejudice, turning it into extraction rather than appreciation. The purpose is to illustrate harm, promoting ethical awareness. This long explanation examines real-world cases, trying to the course's critique of cultural dynamics. Critical links, subcultural appropriation. This dynamic also applies to the relationship between subcultures and mainstream stream culture. When fashion brands sell mass-produced punk clothing at premium prices, they appropriate the aesthetic while stripping it of its anti-capitalist critic. Similarly, corporate use of hype imagery to sell products represents a fundamental contradiction, as those symbols originally represented rejection of consumer culture. So this slide applies appropriation to subcultures. Brands selling punk clothing remove into anti-capitalist critic. The purpose is to show mainstream co-option. This long explanation explores contradiction and commodifying rebellion, connecting to the cycle. Makers of respectful exchange. Cultural exchange, by contrast, involves mutual sharing, attribution, and respect. Indicators of respectful cultural exchange includes acknowledgement of origins and influences, compensation and credit for originators. This slide lists makers of respectful exchange acknowledging origins and providing compensation of credit. Purpose is to contrast with appropriation, promoting ethical practices. This long explanation advocates for mutual respect in cultural sharing, trying to the course's analytic framework. Subcultures as semiotic systems reading science. The language of style. Subcultures develop complex systems of signs and symbols that communicate meaning to both insiders and outsiders. Every element from clothing to hairstyles to music, preferences and linguistic patterns functions as part of a cohesive symbolic language. Semiotic, the study of signs and symbols, provides valuable tools for decoding these systems. So the slide introduces subcultures as semiotic systems where style functions as a language of sign and symbols, communicating to insiders and outsiders. Elements like clothing, hairstyles, music, and linguistics form a cohesive symbolic language. The purpose is to provide tools for decoding subcultures. This long explanation explains semiotic application, showing how symbols convey meaning. Signifier, signified. In semantic, we distinguish between the signifier, the physical form, for example, a safety pin, and the signified, the concept it represents, for example, the rejection of mainstream values, anti-establishment sentiment. Understanding this relationship allows us to analyze how seemingly mundane objects become charged with cultural and political significance within subcultural context. So this slide explains semantic basics, signifier as physical form, like safety pin, signified as concept, for example, anti-establishment. The purpose is to teach how objects gain meaning. This long explanation uses examples to illustrate symbolic transformation in subcultures. Pre-college and meaning making. Subcultures frequently engage in pre-college creative repurposing of existing objects to create new meanings. Bunks, transforming safety pins from functional fasteners to provocative jewelry. Hip hop, posing records as instruments through scratching. Teddy boys adapting and transforming upper class Edwardian fashion for working class expression. So this slide defines pre-college as repurposing objects for new meanings. With examples from various subcultures, the purpose is to show creativity in meaning making. This long explanation explores pre-college as innovation central to subcultural resistance. Reading subcultural texts. For the English department, subcultures provide rich material for textual analysis. Consider the parallels between literary close reading and subcultural analysis, literary analysis, subcultural analysis. So this line draws parallels between literary and subcultural analysis in a table. The purpose is to link English skills to cultural studies. This long explanation shows how close reading applies to subcultures, enhancing analysis. Your turn finding subcultures in the everyday. Number one, digital ethnographic projects. Choose an online community you participate in or observe regularly for 1 week. Document the following: specialized vocabulary unique to the community, unwritten rules and expectations for participation, how new members are socialized as to the community, how status is earned or displayed, relationship between this online space and offline identity. Present your findings as a mini ethnography, analyzing how this digital space functions as a site of cultural production and identity formation. So the slide assign assigns a digital ethnography project, documents an online community, noting vocabulary, rules, socialization, status, and offline relations, presenting as a mini ethnography. The purpose is to apply concepts practically. This long explanation encourages observation of digital subcultures as cultural production sites. Subcultural autobiography. Reflect on your own subculture affiliations, past or present. What drew you to particular music, fashion, or cultural scenes? How did these affiliations shape your sense of identity? What rituals, practices, or knowledge validated membership? How did mainstream culture perceive or respect and represent your subcultural um, affiliations? How have your relationships to these subcultures evolved over time? Write a reflective essay connecting your personal experience to broad or theoretical concepts about subcultural participation. So this slide assigns a subcultural autobiography, reflect on personal subcultural affiliations, including attraction, identify shaping rituals, mainstream perception, and evolving writing an essay linking to theory. Purpose is to make concepts personal. This long explanation promotes self-reflection for deeper understanding. Subcultural recycling analysis. Identify elements of historical subcultures that have been revived in contemporary youth culture. What specific aesthetics, sounds, or practices have been reclaimed? How had the meaning of these elements changed in their new context? What role does nostalgia play in this cultural recycling? How has digital technology affected how historical subcultures are assessed and reinterpreted? Create a visual essay combining images and text, tracing these subcultural revivals and transformations. This slide assigns analysis of subculture recycling, identify revived historical elements, their changed meanings, nostalgia's role, and the digital influence, creating a visual essay. The purpose is to explore continuity. This long explanation examines revival as cultural dialogue using visuals for analysis. Applied research media narrative analysis. Select a contemporary youth culture or trend that has received significant media attraction. Gather at least 5 to 7 news articles, video segments, or social media discussions about this phenomenon on from this phenomenon from different sources, analyze these materials to answer what narrative frames are used to describe the subcultures. For example, moral panic, celebration of innovation, dismissal as trivial. How do these frames compare to historical media coverage of youth subcultures? So this slide assigns media narrative analysis, gather sources on a youth trend, analyze frames like moral panic, insider, outsider differences, societal anxieties, and the influence on perception policy. The purpose is to apply rhetorical skills. This long explanation explores how media construct this youth cultures trying to representation themes. How do insider account from participation differ from outsider representations? What anxieties or aspirations does this media coverage reveal about contemporary today? How might these presentations influence public perception and the policy responses? So this present your findings as either a traditional academic essay or a multimedia presentation that incorporates examples from your research materials. Consider how the English departments focus on narrative, rhetoric, and representation, provide unique insights as to how youth cultures are constructed in public discourse. Okay, this slide concludes the activities suggesting presentation as essay or multimedia, considering English departments focus on narrative and rhetoric for insights into youth culture. The purpose is to integrate literary tools. This long explanation emphasizes how format choice affects message linking to semantic analysis. Conclusion, the unstoppable pulse of reinvention. As we've journeyed through 7 decades of youth subcultures from today, boys to TikTok communities, several enduring truths emerge about the nature of youth cultural expression. Youth subcultures from cultural parameters function as sensitive indicators of broader social conditions emerging in response to specific historical pressures and possibilities, from post-war affluence to economic recessions, from civil rights struggles to digital revolutions. Each generation's cultural expressions reflect the unique stances or circumstances they inherit and the futures they imagine. This slide summarizes the course's journey through 7 decades from TD Boys to TikTok's communities, noting enduring truths like subcultures as cultural barometers reflecting social conditions. The purpose is to reflect on historical patterns. This long explanation synthesizes a course showing subcultures as indicators of pressures from post-war to digital eras. Identity laboratories, Subcultures provide vital spaces for identity experimentation during crucial developmental periods. They offer youth the symbolic resources to construct meaning, followed entities outside prescribed social roles, creating communities of recognition where alternative values and practices can flourish. These identity explorations often produce profound innovations in art, music, language, and fashion. So, this slide emphasizes subcultures as identity laboratories, providing spaces for experimentation and symbolic resources for marginalized youth. The purpose is to highlight psychological benefits. This long explanation explores subculture's role in identity's construction, offering tools for self-expression. Engines of innovation. The culture mainstream depends on subcultures' margins for revitalization, from fashion to music, from slang to social media practices. Innovations typically emerge from youth subcultures before being adapted for mass consumption. This cyclical relationship between margin and mainstream drives cultural evolution while simultaneously neutralizing the radical potential of subculture expression. This slide discovers and discusses subcultures as engines of innovations, revitalizing mainstream from margins through a cyclical relationship that drives evolution but neutralizes radical potential. The purpose is to show dynamic interplay. This long explanation critiques co-option while acknowledging subcultures' cultural contributions. The English department unique perspective. Studying youth subcultures through the lens of English studies offers distinctive insights unavailable through other disciplines. Our focus on narrative language, symbolism, and representation allows us to analyze how meaning is constructed through cultural praxis and how identity is performed through stylistic choices. The theoretical tools developed for literary analysis provoke or provocably effective for decoding the complex symbolic systems of youth culture. This slide connected the course to the English department's perspective, offering insights on narrative language, symbolism, and representation to analyze meaning and identity in subcultures. The purpose is to show relevance. This long explanation highlights how literary tools decode subcultures, enhancing understanding. Moreover, our discipline's attention to historical context, intertextuality, and cultural lineage helps illuminate how contemporary youth cultures build upon reference and transform their predecessors, just as literature exists in conversation with the earlier texts. Each generation of youth enters um, into a dialogue with previous cultural movements, whether through homage or homage, parody, or rejection. Slide notes the department's attention to historical context, cultures, and predecessors through homage, parody, or rejection. The purpose is to deepen analysis. This long explanation shows subcultures as conversational like literature. Looking forward. As we stand at this particular historical moment, youth culture continues to evolve at As we stand at this particular historical moment, youth culture continues to evolve at unprecedented speed. This technology has fundamentally transformed how identity is constructed, how communities form, and how cultural production circulates. Yet beneath these technological changes, the fundamental human needs that drive subcultures or subculture participation remain constant. The desire to belong, to create meaning, to resist oppressive structures, and to imagine alternative possibilities. This slide looks forward, noting your youth culture's rapid evolution with technology, while fundamental needs like belonging, creating, resisting, and imagining remain constant. Purpose is to project future relevance. This long explanation balances a change with constancy, encouraging optimism. The story of youth subcultures is ultimately a profoundly hopeful one, a testament to their irrepressible human capacity for creativity, community, and reinvention in the face of constraint, even as systems of power continually attempt to contain, commodify, and control youth expression. New forms invariably merge, finding fresh cracks in the dominant order through which to grow. This unstoppable pulse of cultural reinvention reminds us that the future remains unwritten, continuously imagined by each generation in their own distinctive voice. The slide concludes with hope portraying youth Subculture's story as a testament to creativity, community, and reinvention. New forms emerge despite attempts at containment, with an unstoppable pulse, reminding that the future is reimagined by each generation. Purpose is to inspire. This long explanation frames subcultures as resilient, ending the course positively. Thank you so much for watching me teaching you this subject, which was cultural studies. Thank you so much, and catch you later next week in another subject.